Sometimes I feel like I can almost predict the future because yesterday I made a video talking about some of the different takes that I saw regarding the initial Nintendo Switch 2 trailer, just trying to explain some things from a potentially different perspective. I covered 5 different things that I saw online, mostly from Twitter chatter, a few websites here and there. But one of the things I talked about is now becoming like this whole big conversation piece. And it's so weird and ridiculous to me that this is something that it's not just random Twitter accounts are focusing on. Now this is something that large video game websites are focusing in on. And sure enough, is the Nintendo Switch 2 too safe? Is it boring? Is it not weird enough for Nintendo? And I think that's such a bizarre statement to make when you look at the history of Nintendo and their releases and their consoles and why things were done in the manner that they were done. And like I said, these are large video game websites. I have not read these articles yet, but maybe I'll understand a bit more. Maybe I'll understand a bit more why these are coming up, because we're going to read these together and go over them. So in my video from yesterday, this was the initial story from Kotaku that I was talking about. If the Switch 2 is just a better Switch, I'll be disappointed. Because honestly, I mean, if the PlayStation 5 is a better PlayStation 4, I'll be disappointed. If the Xbox Series X is a better Xbox One, I'll be disappointed. If the PlayStation 3 is a better PlayStation 2, I'll be disappointed. I don't understand that mentality, especially when something is successful. But is the Nintendo Switch 2 weird enough? Also coming to us from Kotaku with their editors and writers. There's 5 individuals here. No hate towards any of you guys, but we're going to go over this and see if I can figure out something. And then we're going to look at another article from another large website and see what they're bitching about. So this is from a Slack conversation that was lightly edited debate straight from Slack. So basically looking at the Switch 2 trailer and then commenting on it. God, I'm so bored of the Switch 2. Speaking of the Switch 2, is this the first time Nintendo has done the slap a 2 on it thing? How Sony of them. You're a video game journalist, which would mean that if you're writing about video games, you kind of have to understand the history of video games and, video game system predecessors. How are you unsure if Nintendo has ever just done a 2 for a system? Like, isn't that basic knowledge? Isn't that something that you should know if you're writing about video games and writing about video game companies? Like, at least basic history? Like, that's such a weird thing to say. That is such a weird thing to say. Yep, I think it's indicative of a company that suddenly got awfully unsure of itself. Oh, exact opposite. Oh, no. I think they know exactly what they're doing. It's not a fun name the way the Super Nintendo Switch would be, but it's a smart play. Okay, you know what? I agree with that. Not everything has to have a fun name. Like, branding is very important. Does nobody remember the Wii U debacle? The Wii U was a fun name. Oh, look, it's Wii U. We got a Wii U tablet. But fun does not equal success. Fun does not equal sales. Fun does not equal, good profit margins. Weird. A very, very strange. Of course, I have to click more. They want to avoid a Wii U situation, in my opinion. Yep, in many ways. Okay, Zach, you didn't know if Nintendo threw a 2 on something previously. Let's not act like you know what you're talking about here. So I disagree. It's very savvy marketing. But 15 years ago, they would have called this something way better, made it much weirder, hence unsure of themselves. But everything was a different space. R.I.P. Iwata, very fair. Iwata was a very creative force behind Nintendo, but Iwata was also a creative force because Nintendo was forced to be creative. They had to pivot because the GameCube was getting trounced and it wasn't gaining any momentum. And if they would have went head to head with the Xbox 360 and the PS3, with just a stronger Nintendo system, they might not be here right now, or they might be here in a very different capacity. So, it's very, you have to look at the history and understand why they became sort of weird. Super Nintendo wasn't weird. The N64 wasn't weird. The GameCube wasn't really weird. Small, but it wasn't really weird. I mean, doing something weird in this case would almost certainly be a failure from a business standpoint. The Wii, while weird, was also savvy business-wise, as it didn't make... Okay, Caro, and you know what? I will always give the devil their due. Caro understands the basic philosophies here, the basic principles. You know, like SNES wasn't weird. It was basically the equivalent for the time of the Switch. Caro. Is there a good egg? Are you a good egg, Caro? Because you're really making a lot of sense, and I like that. Game Boy Color was basically just Game Boy, but color. Nintendo is an above iteration, except the Game Boy Color had its own library of games. It was more powerful than the original Game Boy. You can't run Game Boy Color games on a Game Boy in just green, various shades of green, or in black and white if you have a pocket, because the Game Boy Color is a stronger system. But yeah, this just seems like, what's the amazing weird idea? Like, I don't understand. I don't understand why it has to be weird. Why we have to have all of this weird stuff. Like, wearable piece of technology that uses holograms or a bizarre twist on AR, that's a failure. That is a failure. That's not going to do anything. Like, this is just, you know what? This conversation is weird, that everyone is just so gung-ho, except Caro. Caro evidently knows some basic stuff here. And maybe that wasn't the best example of an article, but the fact that we have to have a conversation about why this isn't weird and where's the innovation and stuff like that, not taking into account the weird little mouse thing that you still know nothing about because you only have a 2-minute and 30-second trailer. But like I told you guys, this isn't the only article that popped up, because, not to be outdone, Eurogamer, if the Switch 2, Jesus Christ, these ads are so intrusive. If Switch 2 is the end of innovative Nintendo, there's so much to be sad about. What happened to the company that used to surprise us with the weird mouse thing? But I guess we're not taking that into consideration. This should be fun. And this doesn't look like a child. Like, I can understand if this was like someone in their early 20s writing this article, so they have a lot of nostalgia for the Wii. That was like their first console. This looks like a grown-ass adult who should understand things. So, for as long as I can remember, Nintendo has done its own thing. I mean, because of the Wii, yes, there we go, the Wii, yes. Because they had to get out of that power race. Because they were going to lose out their ass if they did exactly what the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 was doing. Revisionist history is all over the place with this stuff. I remember people not giving a Wii a chance at the time. I remember not giving the Wii a chance at the time. But how wrong we were. Well, why didn't you give it a chance? Was it because the motion controls turned you off and you wanted a more traditional control scheme? Could that have anything to do with it? And people got tired of having waggle controls in all these games? Okay. Fast forward to the Wii U, but there's not just hardware, but new ideas. And that did great. You know, it did great. It was a bit of a flop. Once again, revisionist history. The Wii U sold 13 million units in its entire life cycle. To put that into perspective, the Dreamcast, in just 2 years on the market, sold nearly 10 million units. And the Dreamcast is considered a colossal failure. It didn't help Sega, get out of their rut, and it put them out of business. But 13 million is a bit of a flop. Considering the Wii sold over 100 million units. Your follow-up system sells 13 million. Revisionist history, folks. Revisionist history. And I'm not trying to bash anyone writing these articles. Let me get that out of the way, because I know people are get very sensitive and shit like that with stuff like that. I'm not trying to bash any of these articles. Like I said, I'm simply trying to understand why this weird conversation keeps popping up, to see if people can give me a reason to be like, wow, this needs to be weird, because I haven't seen the reason. I haven't seen any sort of logic as to why it should be this way. Nevertheless, the Wii U, without the Wii U, we wouldn't have the Switch, which took all the sentiment of the Wii U, all the good ideas, and realized them in a way that worked. Okay, 140 million. Generation after generation, Nintendo surprised us with new ideas, even when the ideas themselves seem slight. The DS to 3DS wasn't much of a jump. I mean, kind of was. But do you remember using that 3D slider for the first time? Magic, or, well, maybe a headache. Yeah, and that's why they introduced the 2DS, because people weren't utilizing the 3DS with the 3D slider. Most people turned it off. Wii U to the Switch, a concept nailed. Switch to Switch 2. Huh? Huh? I was surprised. I wanted to be Nintendo'd. A Miyamoto up its sleeve. As a trailer, I readied myself for it, for something unexpected, for something unforeseen. A secret compartment lodged in the back of the machine that turned it into a flute or something. I don't know. Something, but there wasn't anything. All I saw was a mysterious, or a design that I knew very well. Joy-Cons, which behave a bit like PC mice, and a mysterious C button, whereas mysterious as it got. Where's the imagination in it at all? Where's the Nintendo in it at all? The toy maker. The toy maker. The toy maker Nintendo. I'm sorry, I thought they were a video game company. I thought they were an entertainment company. Nintendo Entertainment System. If you really want to break it down. Was the Famicom considered a toy? The Super Nintendo considered a toy? The Nintendo 64 considered a toy? No, these were video game consoles. Toys and video games, they do intermingle, but they're not one and the same, at least in my opinion. You might disagree with that. It reminds me of Apple. There was a period of time where Steve Jobs would stand on that Apple stage and routinely pull out a piece of hardware that would reorientate the tech world. Here's an iPhone, here's an iPad, and now it's become predictable. Why is that? Like, oh my freaking Lord. Why did Apple do that? We're going to keep reading this, but focusing on me here. Why did Apple do that? Because Apple was nobody. Apple was nobody for a while. Like, yes, they had the 80s and stuff like that, but in the 90s, in the early 2000s, Apple wasn't anything. It was so far in second place that nobody had, I mean, okay, some people had Macs, but Macs were not common. The Apple brand was nothing like it ended up becoming. And then with things like the success of the iPad and the iPhone, of course, they started to have success with things. So they tinkered with things and they tried to figure out, well, how can we make this better? How can we get more people involved in it? And now Apple is absolutely massive because they found a formula that worked, that was good for business. And they said, hey, okay, this is our baseline now. Now we could just do incremental upgrades to this. And some of these upgrades aren't all that impressive, but it doesn't matter because you have the brand recognition. Now Apple is cool. Apple was the butt of Simpsons jokes back in the 90s for a reason. So I don't understand why we take away the business aspect of this when trying to understand why companies are doing things the way that they are doing them. The Nintendo Switch was extremely successful. Why would you try to do something different? Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is one of the most successful Nintendo games of all time. Why would you try to do something drastically different? Why would you try and reinvent the wheel? Like, I don't get this. Nintendo represented the unpredictable in gaming for so many years. In a world where console design has become homogenized, where the elaborate has been removed of the understandable, at least as far as the innards are concerned, Nintendo was the one company laser focused, it seemed, on remembering what it was in the business of making: games fun. I thought they were in the business of toys. I began thinking less of Nintendo consoles as devices and more of toys. Oh, so it's a problem for you. It's a personal problem because you saw them as toys. Maybe they don't want to be seen as toys. Maybe they want to be seen as something a bit different. Leadership has changed. It's a new era. Two things worry me. One that is that this might be the final form of Nintendo game machines now forevermore. Perhaps, as with the rectangular smartphone, we reach the endpoint in form factor from a design point of view. I doubt Nintendo will ever go back to making a stationary console to sit under their television. So until foldable screen technology becomes so cheap, the general Switch design may be as good as it gets. Should we reinvent the tire to be a square because the circular tire is boring? No, because the circular tire works. It's a proven model. There's nothing wrong with embracing the business side of things, Because the more money these companies make, the more products you get, the bigger they can become, and the more games you end up getting. So at the end of the day, everyone wins. The other thing is that Nintendo might have lost some of its creative nerve or become more conservative. There has been a change in leadership. Furukawa comes from an accountancy background. Does that have something to do with it? Has he instilled a more cautious approach? It's not to say it's a wrong approach, by the way. From a business perspective, this Nintendo Switch 2 might be the perfect play. And a healthy business means a healthy Nintendo, which can't be a bad thing. There's also a chance Nintendo will let its imagination do the talking in the games rather than the hardware. Like they've always done. The games are always the creative aspect. The gimmick is there. But what happens with the gimmick? People get tired of the gimmick, and they focus in on the software itself. Look, never rule Nintendo out. I've learned that the hard way, but I can't shake a feeling of disappointment all the same. A feeling of menace. Natural reaction to something I thought I would be excited talking about with colleagues and Eurogamer readers. Worse still is a realization that's probably it for Nintendo hardware for the next handful of years. And if so, I'll wonder it again. What happened to the Nintendo that you surprised to people? Is that it? I mean, just Nintendo is not your friend. These parasocial relationships with companies, we have to move past this. They're not your friend. And if you needed a reminder they were not your friend, the reminder should have been when they took away Mario 3D All-Stars from you and didn't even let you buy it digitally. They are a business. Business first. And if business is doing well, they're going to continue to do these things. We don't ask these questions when a new PlayStation console comes out. We don't ask these questions when a new Xbox console comes out. We never asked these questions back in the day of why these where's the weirdness? Where's the weird aspect? It's a new mentality that has been instilled in the video game world. And I think that it's a flawed logic, you know, because if Nintendo were to go back to the drawing board and just do something completely different, I think most Switch owners would be pissed off. A lot of Switch owners are happy that there's backwards compatibility. You reinvent the wheel, there's a good chance you're taking away backwards compatibility. And the N64 didn't have backwards compatibility until many years later. Super Nintendo didn't have backwards compatibility. GameCube didn't have backwards compatibility. So if you're taking away backwards compatibility, I think a lot of people would be upset by that. Now they got to buy a new system with all new games. Can't enjoy any of that. To me, a system is a vehicle. It is a vehicle to the software. I buy a Sony system not because of gimmicks. I buy a Sony system to play Sony games. I buy an Xbox system not because of gimmicks. I buy an Xbox system. Well, it used to be because of games. Now I guess it's because of Game Pass. I buy a Nintendo system to play Nintendo games. Like, it's simple. I think people are just overthinking this. And I don't understand, like, why this is such a hot debate. Because at the end of the day, this is business, baby. You're in the business to make money. That would be like me. That would be like me looking at the past week and looking at all these Switch 2 videos and being like, you know what? Let's make a retrospective today about the ColecoVision. Like, just go not looking at what people are interested in, not looking at what has been doing well, but just going completely against the grain. You do have to put passion into things. You do have to understand, you know, there's a delicate balance within the business itself of self-preservation along with the business. But how are we just overlooking the whole freaking mouse thing? Show me another controller that does that. Show me another controller that I could take like this and run it up and down, and it works. Like, bro, come on, man. I get it. We're all very reactionary people. We're all very tuned in because of things like the internet and YouTube and Twitter, social media and stuff like that. So our reactions get out there, and it's fine. But I'm sure come April 2nd, none of these reactions will be remembered. None of these reactions will be thought, and none of these reactions will be cared about. Because the second you see software, your mind is probably going to completely change. And we're going to be in for a very, very fun time. Obviously, you know, this is a very tongue-in-cheek video. Because at the end of the day, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying that my opinion is better. But I did call this. I did say that this was going to end up becoming a thing. And the fact that it ended up becoming a thing so quickly, it just baffles me. It genuinely baffles me. Like I said, no disrespect to any of the writers here, no disrespect to any of their opinions. I just strongly disagree with them. And I think, like, reading all this, it didn't change my mind. It didn't make me realize, oh yeah, it would have been better off if it was weird. It would have been better off if it was something completely off the wall. If anything, it made me more set in my ways because they just gloss over so many important factors that go into this. The reasoning why Nintendo got weird. The reasoning why they're probably wanting to emulate the success of the Nintendo Switch. The reasons why Nintendo is in the position that they are after a catastrophic Wii U disaster. Let me know in the comment section down below, though. What do you think about this? Am I right? Am I wrong? Somewhere in the middle? You could be honest with me. I don't take it personal. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, comment, share, hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.